Welcome to the AME Food Testing Show. Today's topic, will the Food Safety Modernization Act make our food safer? Our guest today, Baylen Linnekin. He is the Executive Director of Keep Food Legal, a Washington, D.C. nonprofit that advocates in favor of food freedom, the right of every American to grow, raise, produce, buy, sell, share, cook, eat, and drink the foods of their very own choosing. He writes a weekly column on food law and policy issues for Reason Magazine's website and serves as an adjunct faculty member at American University in Washington, D.C. He has earned an LL.M, which is a Master of Law in Agricultural and Food Law from the University of Arkansas. He also has a Juris Doctorate degree from Washington College of Law and a master's degree in learning sciences from Northwestern University. His bachelor's degree is in sociology from American University. Now, welcome with me, Baylen Linnekin. Baylen?
Thanks very much for having me on, Andy.
Well, you are most welcome. Would you like to add anything to your introduction to let our audience of 72,000 food production, food quality, food safety, and food security managers know a little bit more about you?
I think that was a very kind and more than adequate introduction. You talked about my academic background and what I'm doing right now and my nonprofit, Keep Food Legal. So, no, I'm very happy with that lead in.
Well, very good, Baylen. Let's begin with a very fundamental question. What is the Food Safety Modernization Act?
That's a very good question, a good place to start. It is widely considered to be the most sweeping change in our nation's food laws over the past 75 years. It was passed, I think, in 2010, so you could even say in the last 80 years. I think since the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act was passed in 1938. So it's it was a long time coming. Lots of food safety groups, consumer groups, members of Congress, the FDA, were all sort of in agreement, along with some large companies, large producers, large farmers, that this was the way to go. And so it passed, and President Obama signed, I think, in early 2010. And where we are at now is that there are still rules that need to be implemented, and the FDA has opened up some key ones to public comment, and those are currently still in the comment process, and we're waiting to see whether the FDA will move forward with that, as I think many suspect, or we'll go back to the drawing board, as I think many others hope.
Wonderful. Whenever we talk about federal regulation, the first question people ask me, well, Andy, who has to comply with it?
Yeah, that is the key now, isn't it? Lots of people are for stricter laws and new laws, but they're often unaware that they may have to comply with them. Others want stricter laws because they know they can afford to comply with them, and that their smaller competitors can't, so it gains them a competitive advantage. I think you're hinting at who is it who has to comply with the tenets of the Food Safety Modernization Act, are you not?
Yes, go ahead.
That actually is a more difficult question than it would appear on its face, because especially under the new law, regulations that are open to comment, there's a question. When the act was passed by Congress, there was built into it what's become known as the Tester Amendment after Senator John Tester, and it was supposed to exclude small farmers and to make sure that they wouldn't be subject to the same strict regulations as producers who sell nationwide. And Senator Tester cheered it as a victory. I think he he actually said, we won, in talking about small farmers and producers after passage of the act and including the Tester Amendment. But it turns out that the amendment may not actually have the same sort of teeth that Senator Tester had claimed or had hoped. And so now it's possible that lots and lots of small farmers who supported the Tester Amendment because they thought it would exclude them will in fact be subject to the Food Safety Modernization Act.
So what you're saying is there's a wide application of this new law, and many people need to comply and be concerned about compliance. This is a very practical question, will this new law, FSMA, make food safer, in your opinion?
That's another question that I think is, let's say it's quite possible that it will. I am incredibly dubious, and I've written about this from even before the time that the act was passed. I'm incredibly dubious that it will make food safer, and I think the best evidence that it will have little or no impact on food safety comes actually from the FDA, of all places. In announcing the two rules that are under consideration right now, the FDA said that if those two rules are implemented to perfection, and I don't know how, I tend to be skeptical of government. I don't know what sort of bent you take, whether you believe the government is always tells the truth and always implements programs and regulations perfectly, or whether you're more on the skeptical side like me. But the FDA said that even if these two rules are implemented to perfection, and it says that right at their website, then combined they will make our food up to 4% safer, which for $500 million a year is, it's not a drop in the bucket financially, but it's a drop in the bucket in terms of making our food safer.
That's a fascinating percentage, especially when I think about the other 96% of the volume of food. You know, Baylen, as we have chatted, I'm thinking on October the 9th, today, our government is in a shutdown.
Mm-hmm.
What if a major foodborne illness were to break out during this government shutdown? What is your opinion on those two controverting forces, outbreak and government shutdown?
That's a great question. There's actually a piece by Baylen Linnekin in Wired today, I think, or perhaps within the last couple of days. The headline is "There's a major foodborne illness outbreak and the government shut down." The article attempts to tie the two together, but actually it turns into sort of a post hoc ergo propter hoc issue where there's sort of a causal connection that's lacking. She talks about how CDC staff have been furloughed, and I actually think that's a terrible idea. I mean, the CDC has an important role to play in disease outbreak. I mean, those are people who genuinely, are sort of on the front line. I mean, they're essential, and in a way that I don't suspect that FDA or USDA food safety inspectors are. I know that. Going back to some of the research I've written about, for example, there was a case where USDA meat inspectors are supposed to be present all the time when meat's being processed, and yet there were some factories in the 2000s, I think the mid part of the first part of this century, in which they weren't present at all for days and even weeks at a time. During that time, food safety problems, foodborne illness, actually decreased. So you had this vast array of inspectors who weren't showing up to do their job, and yet somehow food got safer. So the link between inspection and food safety is tenuous, although the link with the CDC, where they're trying to identify tainted food and to sort of identify illness and that sort of thing. I mean, I think that's a much better argument that those people are essential to our public health than FSIS and others.
Well, Baylen, you certainly have an analytical mind when it comes to the relationship of government, safety, and the effectual regulation that's netted out of that equation. Let me ask you on recent events where the U.S. Attorney has now filed charges against two food producers who unintentionally or negligently, which has not been determined, filed misdemeanor charges against two brothers whose family has been producing cantaloupes for well over 100 years. Can you comment, using this analysis that you've previously outlined, on the new application of criminal liability for food producers?
Yeah, I mean, I can't comment specifically on the case because obviously it's going to be in a courtroom, and I don't know all the facts. So, but I can certainly comment on the FDA and having authority to pursue criminal charges against people, food producers. Certainly, in cases where intentional or even negligent, sort of mishandling or fraud, adulteration, misbranding, all sorts of sort of traditional food safety issues, where there's negligence, or certainly where there's some sort of intentional act to contaminate food, I think criminal charges are absolutely appropriate. It doesn't sound in this case like it was intentional, but that's the state's not, or the government's not pursuing that. But I think in cases where something is unintentional or not done knowingly, I think criminal charges probably will be inappropriate. And I think it just sort of goes back to the typical mens rea component of criminal law, which says that there has to be some sort of intent in most cases. And it's possible that a misdemeanor charge on an unintentional action is appropriate in this case, but again, I don't know the particulars of the case. The facts will undoubtedly come out in the courtroom, which frankly is where that sort of thing should be hashed out.
Very good, Baylen. Your perspectives as an advocate to keep food legal. If you were to get on a soapbox and you had a room full of 700 food producers, what would be your outgoing message in just a few sentences?
Well, I'm going to pretend I'm actually on that soapbox since you have that many listeners. My plea, I guess, would be that that we all should have the freedom to enjoy the foods that we want. It doesn't mean that one cannot be critical of other people's choices. Raw milk, I know, is a contentious food safety issue, but in cases like raw milk or with foods like raw milk, I've written before where a warning is appropriate, a ban is inappropriate. I think that providing more information, such as warnings, is absolutely appropriate. I think that there are plenty of food choices out there that are right for individuals, and they can make up their minds. I think that true freedom, in the same way that the ACLU looks at speech, the ACLU is not saying this speech is wonderful and that's why we'll protect it. They're saying this is speech and that's why we'll protect it. And so I look at food the same way. One needn't like another person's food choices to understand that they have a right to make those choices. And I should note, America's food supply is one of the safest in the world, if not the safest in the world. Producers are doing a great job at all sort of sizes of the economy, from the small producers to the big ones. And I think that the market responds to demand. And I think that we all can make choices within the marketplace that will make us happy and often be entirely safe.
Well, Baylen, I'd like to now offer you the opportunity to offer your closing remarks and, if you wish, to foster the cause of your nonprofit association and any final comments.
Sure. Well, thank you, Andy, very much for having me on the show. And if anyone would like to learn more about Keep Food Legal, we're the only group in the country that's advocating in favor of food freedom of choice. as a nonprofit. And so you can check us out at keepfoodlegal.org. I would welcome you to follow us on Twitter as well, at keepfoodlegal. And you can find us on Facebook. And we have a monthly e-newsletter you can sign up for at our website. I also do plenty of speaking appearances. I'm speaking at Yale University and Yale University Law School next week. You can find our events on our website. I think that this podcast is a valuable service, and I really appreciate you having me on, Andy.
Well, Baylen, I'm sure our 72,000 listeners will listen to your remarks in the spirit of food freedom. I don't think any of my listeners want, as a food producer, want to be charged with criminal charges, and I don't think they want more regulation that would not produce or help produce safe food for their consumers. Thank you so much for your time, Baylen, and I wish you a great day.
Thank you very much, Andy. Cheers.